Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Social Justice Forum. I am Daren Jaime, and if you're asking the question, what is this show about? Well, we take a look at the inequities that a lot of people face. We promote civic engagement, we bring awareness, we have some great guests, and we talk about the topics that matter the most. So we want you to stay connected to us because the Social Justice Forum begins right now. And welcome back. EarthJustice is a not-for-profit public interest law organization that's dedicated to protecting the magnificent places, natural resources, and the wildlife of this earth and defending the right of all people to a healthy environment. We're pleased to have as our first guest the senior attorney at EarthJustice, Meagan Burton. And Meagan, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, nice to meet you. So happy to be here.
Glad to have you sharing with us. And when we talk about environmental justice, obviously, we're seeing a lot of climate change, we're seeing a lot of green spaces, but environmental justice still has some work to do. So share with us a little bit about the work that you're doing in the area of environmental justice here in New York City.
EarthJustice is a national organization, nonprofit organization, like you said. And in New York, we partner with a lot of environmental justice, consumer, community groups, as well as public interest groups. We engage in combating and imposing the construction and running of fossil fuel plants that are located in frontline communities. We've pushed a lot of city and state legislation that will help benefit environmental justice groups. And as well as we're engaged in a lot of utility rate cases to promote equity and as well as energy justice.
Yeah, when we talk about utility rate cases, I was just overseas a little while ago, and they had a huge protest. Matter of fact, it stopped me from getting to my interview because they were protesting the fact of gas and electric has gone up. And we know the same thing has happened right here in the United States with a lot of people dealing with skyrocketing rates and yet and still a downflated economy. What are you seeing on your end by way of this, and how are you helping to deal with this?
So yes, that's exactly what's happening in New York State as well as the rest of the country. So in the utility rate cases, we are really pushing, and first of all, we're working with many community groups as well as environmental justice groups and making sure that their voices are brought to the table, because many of these utility regulation and energy decisions are being made behind closed doors, and folks' voices are not often being heard. So we, when we're engaged in these utility rate cases, we're really pushing for, like I said, energy justice. We're trying to minimize and decrease energy burdens. We're trying to increase and put more money towards energy efficiency and weatherization. So making sure that individuals' homes are well heated, well cooled, and that those homes aren't losing any energy, which often leads to really high prices. We're also trying to advocate for more renewable energy and clean energy so that we're not so dependent on the fossil fuel industry, and also looking and trying to be more creative to make these clean energy alternatives and technologies more affordable for frontline groups so that they aren't left behind in this transition to the clean energy future.
We're hearing a lot about the Inflation Reduction Act, and some of our viewers may not be so familiar, but can you give us a little background into the Inflation Reduction Act and what this actually would mean for people?
Yes, of course. So the Inflation Reduction Act, which is often referred to as the IRA, so it will offer opportunities to really supercharge and fund the state's climate law, which I'm not sure if you've had a chance to dig into, but it's the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, often referred to as the CLCPA. So the IRA will expedite emissions reductions, particularly in under-resourced communities. It'll play a key role in the CLCPA. Emission reductions are especially crucial in communities of color who experience detrimental health effects like asthma and lung and heart disease from disproportionate air pollution. The IRA will also accelerate clean energy transition that will lower energy costs, like we just talked about, for folks in New York. And it will expand clean energy production, create jobs in the manufacturing sector. It will provide resources for rural and municipal utilities to switch to clean power. And will also help families electrify and weatherize their homes and remove barriers for community solar. And one last thing, it will also help electrify the transportation by funding electrification for the United States Postal Office. It will invest in clean school and transit buses, as well as municipal large and heavy duty trucks, such as garbage trucks. So it will really help reduce greenhouse gas emissions and pollutions in particulate matter in the city, as well as rural areas.
Yeah, well, you know, our station is located right here in the Bronx, and we have a lot of questions because the high asthma rates, particularly right there as you go across the Cross Bronx Expressway, a lot of people having to deal with these gases and things that really impact the air. With this Inflation Reduction Act, talk to us about the positive outcomes that you think will definitely be netted in local neighborhoods, simply right here in New York City by this act.
Yes, so kind of just the two things that I mentioned about electrifying homes as well as transportation. In New York City, building pollution, so emissions from buildings creates, I think, maybe 30 to 40% of the pollution in New York City, and transportation is another 30%. So with a lot of this funding and grants coming from the IRA, it will really help and expedite the transition away from fossil fuels and help communities transition to alternatives like heat pumps or electric vehicles, electric charging stations, so that communities such as the Bronx or parts of the Queens or Brooklyn, where there's really almost like a concrete neighborhood with not a lot of vegetation or trees to really help reduce the heat. And there's all of these horrible and poor public health issues happening. These investments will help reduce the pollution in these neighborhoods.
And so for us here in New York, obviously we are seeing some differences in terms of the weather. I think across the country, we're seeing a whole lot of difference. We're seeing extreme weather. And just when you think it's going to be one thing, it turns out to be something totally different. We're being impacted in a variety of different ways. Talk to us about this climate change that we're seeing, and your take on that.
Yeah, so rising global average temperatures is really associated with widespread changes in weather patterns. So we're seeing extreme heat and extreme cold in the winter, and it's just flip-flopping back and forth. So scientific studies have indicated that extreme weather events such as heat waves and large storms, hurricanes or whatnot, are likely to become more frequent and prevalent and more intense with human-induced climate change. Extraction and burning of fossil fuels is the core of this issue. That is why EarthJustice, as well as our partners, are really advocating for the transition away from fossil fuels and really helping to advance climate-friendly action throughout New York City, New York State, as well as, our country.
And when we talk about awareness about fossil fuels and awareness about climate change, talk to me about public perception, because there's some people who could say, hey, I noticed a change, but it isn't part of the day-to-day. But your work really is about creating an awareness and really supporting and stepping up and being a voice for the voiceless. Are you finding that more and more people are becoming more involved and engaged, if you will, when it comes to the area of climate change?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think more and more people are seeing the connection between fossil fuel industry and climate change and seeing how that impacts their day-to-day. So I think folks are still becoming more aware, they're becoming more engaged, and are really frustrated with the fossil fuel industry because it's really leading and impacting their whether like heating their homes, having high financial debt from energy burdens, impacting their health, whether that's cardiovascular, asthma, birth defects. And so I think folks are upset and really are demanding a change from city council, from the governor, as well as at the federal level. And so we are seeing more and more comment letters, more and more calls going into, or that the state regulatory agencies are receiving. For example, the Public Service Commission, they're definitely receiving a lot more calls, and a lot more voices are being heard as a result of high energy bills, and people want to change. They want more access to electric vehicles. They want more access to having their school buses for their children's not being run on dirty fossil fuel or diesel, but on electric vehicles. And they want there to be more funding for a transition away from fossil fuels in their buildings.
Meagan, from your perspective, what is it that maybe our viewers should be paying particular attention to at this time right now?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. I think they should really be focusing on what Governor Hochul, what Mayor Adams is saying and doing, and how they are holding the fossil fuel industry accountable. Are they allowing and enabling the fossil fuel and the gas utilities to operate as business as usual, or are they actually making big changes? I mentioned earlier that we do have the CLCPA, the Climate Leadership and Protection Act, but are we actually going to be able to meet our mandates and our goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and 2050? We seem to be kicking the can down the road as opposed to actually investing in more clean energy infrastructure and being creative to ensure that frontline communities and environmental justice communities aren't left behind. But we need to be, both Governor Hochul and Mayor Adams need to reach out to these communities and explain to them, like if there is going to be inclement weather coming up, or there's going to be a heat wave, or there's going to be a storm coming up, the utilities need to be out there communicating with the community and letting them know this so that there won't be any detrimental impacts. And we also need to be rolling out more electric vehicle infrastructure in those communities, more community solar, and more induction stoves and heat pumps in those communities so they're not so reliant on fossil fuel and putting gas in the building.
I remember when Al Gore was out, and he was vice president of the United States, and he was taking this initiative to task, talking about climate change and really speaking about what is going on in our, in our country and the environment. It seemed as though back then that he was talking to an empty room, because a lot of people weren't really embracing the issues that were really going on environmentally. Are you finding more and more both the public as well as elected officials are embracing these things? Because some people just take it for granted, and some people just not had a real interest. Are you finding that more and more, particularly on the elected officials front, and then also in the general public, that we're seeing more and more people become actively engaged?
Yeah, I think everywhere climate change is being discussed, and I think people are concerned about it because it's really, as I said, impacting everybody's lives. But I think what scares folks is that it's happening and we don't have a clear pathway as to how we're going to fix this, and also that it's going to take some investment. And we need to be able to shift and invest and spend more money on clean energy infrastructure. Because if we are going to be relying or just kicking the can down the road, or believing everything that the fossil fuel industry says, like let's switch to renewable natural gas, or we can rely on hydrogen and that will solve the problem, both of those fuels just lead us to still rely on fossil fuel, and that's not going to solve the problem. And so we need to be really thinking critically as to like how we're going to be solving this problem and how we're going to be doing it equitably. I think the public is really excited and engaged and wants to see more action happen at the regulatory level, at the city as well as the state. And we really need to make sure that the Public Service Commission is following the CLCPA and making sure that we're going to meet our targets and really reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 as well as 2050.
Yeah, I know the work that you do. You really represent your clients for free, and you really step up and do that. Talk to us about how you're able to do that, because it's a real, uh, blessing, if you will, to have somebody step up and say, listen, not only are we going to represent you, but you don't have to worry about costs because the issue is greater than money right now.
Yeah, EarthJustice is extremely lucky. We have an incredible amount of staff that does a lot of fundraising that allows us. We have about over 180 full-time attorneys throughout the country, as well as we have research assistants, we have staff scientists, as well as paralegals that really are able to dig into a lot of these issues. And that's really what makes EarthJustice unique compared to other environmental organizations, is that we represent all of our clients for pro bono, for free. So we will really dig in, represent, and partner with frontline communities, community groups, environmental justice groups, and we'll partner with them and litigate these cases for as long as it takes, for 8 years, 9 years, 15 years, like we are there. EarthJustice's motto is, because the earth needs a good lawyer. And it's the earth that needs a good lawyer, frontline communities, tribal groups. We need to make sure that Earth, like the planet will be here around the next 50 years and that we are protecting all of our natural resources.
Yeah, the earth does need good lawyers to really protect it. And certainly you're doing a great job about that. For people who want to find a way to get connected and also at the same time be able to support some of the initiatives and causes that you're fighting for, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, so you can go to our website, which is www.earthjustice.org. And there's several tabs in there about that. Anyone who would like to know more information can learn about us, who our team is, or donate, or how to become involved or engaged either at the local level or the federal level. We also have many federal lobbyists as well as state lobbyists that are really pushing these issues and advocating and advancing new legislation that will help our partners as well as the public lands and wildlife.
Yeah. And so for you right now, if you had to put all of the issues on the table and say, this one is the most major that we really need to be paying attention to, what would you say that is?
Ooh, that's a tough question. There's, I would say, two big bills in New York State that unfortunately didn't get passed past session, but we are going to be really aggressively pushing them this session. One of them is the all electric buildings bill, which is, we're really fighting that all new buildings in New York State, hopefully after 2024 or 2027, will be all electric, so that we will no longer be reliant on fossil fuels and they will be all electric, which will help bring down greenhouse gas emissions, particulate matter, and will make us less reliant on dirty fossil fuel plants that are often located in environmental justice communities. And there's one other important bill that is a little bit wonky, but extremely important. It's called I'm going to blank on it in 1 second, but it's called the Gas Transition and Affordable Energy Act. And that is really holding like a huge and important regulatory agency in New York State, the Public Service Commission, holding them accountable and making sure that they are coming up with a strategic plan in order for New York to meet their climate goals, to meet their greenhouse gas reduction goals, and coming up with a strategic way so that our transition off of fossil fuels will be done equitably, that won't increase in energy debt, and low income folks won't have high arrears, if any arrears, and that we can really focus and transition off the idea or notion of subsidizing, meaning all people who pay for gas or electricity pays for the gas infrastructure. We want to be transitioning onto renewable energy, so solar, offshore wind, as well as heat pumps. And so those two bills, I think, are extremely important and will put New York in the right direction and continue our fight against climate change.
Meagan, Burton, we got to leave it there, but thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Really, environmental justice is huge. And here in New York, there's a lot to be fighting for, but thank you for being on the front lines and the work that you're doing. Glad to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
All righty, Meagan Burton, our guest. And we want to let you know that after this, we're going to take a quick break, but stay with us because we do have more here on the Social Justice Forums. And welcome back. Cancer impacts people of all age, race, and ethnicities, as well as identity, no matter what your sexual orientation or location. However, there are underserved minority communities that face specific disparities when it comes to receiving cancer treatments. We sat with the Associate Director of Clinical Science at Montefiore Einstein Cancer Center, Professor of Medicine at Albert Einstein College of Medicine, Dr. Balazs Halmos, on a recent grant to improve lung cancer care in underserved minority patients. Let's take a look. One of the things that you're doing is really working with this grant, and congratulations. 3 years, $1 million. Let's talk about it for a second. What exactly will this grant be able to study?
Thank you so much for allowing us to present our work in a way. It's always exciting to take new research initiatives on. And this is focusing on allowing us to engage, monitor patients better on some of these new medicines. Nowadays, we have all kinds of novel treatments, for patients with a cancer diagnosis, and they can be targeted treatments, going after some molecular changes in the cancer, or immunotherapies. These are really novel treatment options that activate our own immune system to fight the cancer better, but they have downsides as well, just like everything else. There's no free lunch in medicine in a way. So these medicines can overactivate your immune system and they can turn against your own organs, which sounds frightening, leading to inflammation in different parts of the body. So finding those side effects early on can help us manage them better, keep patients on the active medicine for a longer time, and thereby improve the outcome of cancer treatment, these novel cancer treatments that we're so excited to have. And this is exactly what this grant is about. This allows us now to use technology, bring technology to the patient's home, to the underrepresented minority patients of the Bronx, which we are so proud to serve, both African Americans and Hispanic patients, making up 80 to 90% of the patient population that we serve at the Montefiore Einstein Cancer Center. So we're able to offer patients on immunotherapy with a lung cancer diagnosis participation in this program, whereby they can have wearable devices at home that communicate back to our research team as to what's happening with their vital signs, their oxygen level, for example. And they also provide a special app that will educate patients to use, the best, whereby they have 24/7 access to expert nursing assistants to help monitor them, intervene at the time of need, when side effects happen, and maintain, adherence to treatments that can ultimately help improve their outcomes. So we're very excited about this.
Yeah. So what are you actually hoping that will actually come out of this? Because I know you got several issues when it comes to lung cancer. What are you hoping that these issues will be able to address and deal with?
Again, it's improving our ability to monitor, intervene, and then maintain treatment benefit and engage our patients the best possible way, and also learn about how to use these special tools, remote monitoring tools, wearable devices in patient populations where maybe the use of the technology is not that much familiar. Maybe there's language barriers, maybe there's other barriers to break down. So through this learning, hopefully we can inform the larger community as to how to use this type of technology the best for our very diverse patient population.
You speak about use of technology, and that's going to be a key component in what you do. Give us a little insight as to how this technology will really be able to help you, and then consequently also the patients that you're seeing.
Again, if you think about it, using a wearable device, just like you guys, use for fitness activities and so on. If a patient wears that at home and we have access to that information, we can monitor changes over time. And maybe some of those changes could be concerning. We could learn about that early, and we could intervene to make sure that if there's an issue in terms of side effects such as lung inflammation leading to lower oxygen levels, we can treat earlier and thereby prevent severe outcomes. It also allows access again, for patients from home using different apps, and if those apps are difficult, conventional, communication tools such as phones, to this 24/7 expert professional nursing service that eases access again in terms of communication, breaking down any potential issues in terms of lack of access or limited access to optimize patient care.
So for yourself, I know that it's a lot of work that's going into it. The team is going to be working into it. What does this grant really mean to you? Because a lot of people suffer from lung cancer. A lot of people die from lung cancer. I know that this will give you some more insight, but what does it mean to you to be able to have this grant and to be able to bring this home?
Well, we're very fortunate that this is not the only grant in a way that we have, at the Montefiore Einstein Cancer Center. We have terrific cancer programs, and we're able to offer many, many novel treatments to our patients with different cancer diagnoses, including lung cancer. This adds an extra layer outside just the being able to offer new treatments. Now we're able to deliver them, through the use of technology in more convenient, more accessible, and hopefully safer manner over time.
Yeah. So how do Bronx residents really access the trials, the research, and become a part of the study?
Well, the Montefiore health system is all throughout the Bronx. As you know, every single street corner there's a Montefiore office, so we're not so difficult to find. I think our cancer center is fully integrated, within the institution, the Bronx, and we're doing a better job as of late to engage with our community through all kinds of community events. But of course, if somebody has a cancer diagnosis, getting the proper referral to us, will be important. And we're fortunate enough to have a wide array of, cancer research activities, clinical trials that we could consider. Those are always dependent on the patient's very specific diagnosis, stage of cancer, special, information needed about the cancer. But we have a broad array of those services, from very early phase studies of novel agents to late phase development of really very promising therapies that we can bring to our patients. Just as an example, now we have a lot of excitement about the cellular therapies called CAR T-cell therapies, and our leukemia teams in the Bronx have been the first in a way to provide information how these special treatments work for the very specific, underrepresented minority populations in the U.S., both Hispanic and African Americans, and thereby enriching information not just for the patients of the Bronx, but worldwide.
Can you give me some insight? Because we know that this is about the grant. We talked a lot about the grant, the research that's going to be done. But when we talk about Montefiore Einstein Cancer Center, there's a lot more that meets the eye. You do a great job of promoting information and awareness. Can you give us some insight as to a little bit more as to what the Cancer Center does in terms of awareness, screenings, and making Bronxites available of the services that you have?
That's a great question, because research is one thing, but we have standard cancer care that we should provide to all of our patients. And on top of that, the best thing we can do is to screen for cancers at an early stage when they are the most curable, and even better, try to prevent them as possible. And our cancer center and the Montefiore health system does all that. And I think we're doing it better and better in terms of educating our communities about prevention efforts, and that can be vaccinations against the HPV virus, that can be colorectal cancer screening, so colon polyps can be removed before they turn into cancers. And that can also be very specific screenings for cancer, such as a lung cancer screening program, which is now in the community, going to different churches and community centers to educate our patient population the best, so they get access to this information. They get the preventative and screening strategies early on, so we could prevent them from either getting a diagnosis of cancer or that cancer presenting at a later stage where it's more difficult to treat. But if we face a later stage cancer, luckily we have a very robust cancer center to help patients out and provide them access to even the best novel treatments as well.
Dr. Halmos, so much going on. I want to thank you. Again, they've received a 3-year, $1 million grant to deal with helping to find out about lung cancer and to do some research there. Hopefully we'll be able to have you back to find out the updates and some of your findings.
Thank you so much for the invite there, and I look forward to coming back soon.
All righty. Well, we have to take a quick break. We will be back with more right after this.
We built a media network for you.
BronxNet TV.
Come learn in your new state-of-the-art studios at Lehman College.
At Mercy College.
And coming soon to the South Bronx in the Hub.
Inspire with your stories, culture, history.
Your Bronx on BronxNet.
Engage with us.
Connect with us at your channels and at BronxNet.tv.
Learn, engage, inspire. BronxNet TV.
From the Bronx
to the world.
BronxNet.
Welcome back to the show. Community Voices Heard Power is a not-for-profit organization educating and advocating for Black and Brown communities about issues that affect them negatively. The next guest creates as well as builds strategies to center the voice of Black women in necessary policy change within New York State. Joining us now to share is the Executive Director of Community Voices Heard. It is sister organization Community Voices Heard Power, Juanita O. Lewis. And Juanita, thank you for being with us again, and glad to have you.
Thank you so much, Daren. I'm excited to be back here.
Yeah. And when we talk about Black voices being heard, particularly that of women, I know that's an emphasis of yours, but talk to us about how you arrived at this necessity to say that when it comes to women and Black voices, it has to be heard.
Yeah. So, this survey came about 2-3 years ago through our sister organization, Community Voices Heard Power. The whole idea was to start looking at Black women seen as policy makers and changers and originators, as opposed to just, those that go to the ballot box and shift elections, right? Because we just keep seeing statistics always showing that Black women usually make a difference in critical elections. And we always get thanked by those who win for Black women voting. But when we see policies being created, they don't reflect the things that are impacting Black women, right? You don't see anything about Black maternal health. You're not hearing the housing conversation really centering around that Black women are the most vulnerable for eviction. And so when this survey came about, it was like, this is an opportunity to actually get our voices out there and to show that we as Black women, we're not a monolith. We come with different experiences, different backgrounds, different interests that are critical to having real equitable decision-making policies and opportunities.
So equate our viewers a little bit more with the survey, because out of the survey came some real tangible things that need to be looked at and worked on. But talk about the background of the survey and what was going on there.
Yeah. So, the idea to do the survey, like I said, came from all of the things around Black women's voices being left out of the policy decision-making process. And so came up with the idea to survey 5,000 women across New York State, Black women, and asking, what are issues that are important to you? How do you engage in politics? How do you think about politics? What are barriers? Things of that nature. And so, we were knocking on doors, we had Facebook ads, we had text campaigns that were, asking those questions from our survey. And so we were able to get the results back from our first phase of the project. And, the results were interesting, right? We were able to see that some of the top issues that were impacting Black women were housing, being able to have livable wages, healthcare, and education. And that 18 to 35-year-olds from the demographic that we spoke to, right, the 18 to 35-year-olds, they talked about being the least engaged, or the data showed that they were the least engaged in the political process, because there was a big gap around voter education and voter engagement. Again, statistics show, at least in New York State, that Black women are the highest of being registered, but the least engaged. And so it was an eye-opening moment for us, because then that allowed us to start thinking about how we do our voter education process, right? How are we talking about these issues and how we're talking to these particular demographics? Because we had women from the age of like 18 all the way at least, I think, to 80 something fill out the survey. But it was that demographic of the 18 to 35-year-olds that really stood out to us because of the barrier around civic engagement. And then overall, right, I think that was just something that came up as well. There's different degrees of engagement for women, and they named what's in the barrier. One was just understanding the process. Mm-hmm. And then another thing that was listed out was being able to attend particular meetings, because a lot of city council meetings and things of that nature are held during the day. If you're a working woman, you're not able to make those meetings. So you're automatically left out of that process. And so that will allow us to go back to, some of these council members and elected officials and say, your meetings aren't accessible for a large percentage of people. What does that look like? What needs to shift?
Well, talk to me about this, because we talk about the issue of childcare, right? We know that that's pretty interesting, and we know that that's a staple. You talk about gender pay. We've been talking about that for years. But when you took this survey, what was it that really stuck out most to you that was surprising that maybe you didn't know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say the thing that stuck out the most was, so let me take a step back. Nothing was a surprise to me, right? But the thing that was interesting was, from the women that took the survey, a large amount of them were college educated or had advanced degrees. But the jobs that they had didn't pay them enough to pay back the debt that they owed for getting those degrees, or that you would think would be what someone should earn based on the education that they have. And so, like, that was pretty shocking, right? So if you have a master's degree, you've gone to school, you took out school loans, but you don't have a job that actually pays you enough. So that really stuck out to us. And so it had a different lens or a different way of talking about gender equity and pay equity, right? Because it allows us to talk about what's the difference between Black women and white women or other women of color in terms of pay. But then there's the level of, we actually can be paid even more, right? Because of the degrees we have, the experience we have, and because of race.
Yeah. So, when we talk about politicians and elected officials, obviously they are at the forefront of change too, because they're the drivers of policy and they're the ones that can really make something happen. So from your perspective, give me a little drill down as to what possibly administration can be doing in this time to really address some of these issues that are very, that aren't so hard to really be able to be achieved?
Right. Well, that's a good one. So, one thing that's starting to happen now, you definitely hear more about Black maternal health, and like the horror stories that you hear, but there are ways that they actually could be prevented. And so, like, this survey allowed us to lift that up even more. And so just really gauging one thing of like, what does that look like at the city level, right? But what can be done at the state level? So when it comes to like access for healers, when it comes to, making sure that there's more opportunities for Black doctors, nurses, doulas, midwives, whatever, to be a part of the process, right? Is a huge thing. So what does that look like when you're thinking about, debt relief for schools or even pipelines, right? So that has us thinking about what that could be. On the housing front, when we're talking about Black women being like the most vulnerable around evictions, we need stronger eviction protection, right? We need a real conversation about who's impacted and why they're impacted, and having, state level laws like good cause eviction has to make sure that tenants are protected. And then having the resources and the access for people to know what their rights are across the state. We also need to have, statewide right to counsel. If I'm going in and I see my landlord there with a lawyer and I don't have legal representation because I can't afford it, at least now there will be lawyers that are there whose job it is to be there and be my counsel to defend, right? So it allows us to have some really clear budget asks, have some stronger, legislative asks at the city and state level.
Yeah.
And a lot of that will be determined when we do our second phase, right? Because we just finished our first phase, we're going through our second phase now. That'll be launched the week of September 19th.
Mm-hmm.
And from taking that information from phases 1 and 2, being able to meet with our leadership team to say like, okay, so how do we want to slice this and actually create the agenda from there that we would launch in 2023. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see some of this back on there.
So really, you are having a second survey that's coming out, and
second phase, yep.
Right, and so the second phase of the survey, what will that particularly drill down to?
Yeah, so the second phase is, one, some lessons learned from the first phase in terms of some of the questions, and it actually drills some of the questions down a little bit more. So when we talked about housing, we knew that was an important issue. We asked particular questions around housing, right? For women to rank what was most important to them around housing. So we had a list from eviction protection to home ownership to gentrification, all of those things. And then whatever are the big biggies from that allows us to form our platform, right? The same thing around education, the same thing around wages and healthcare.
Yeah. So as we look now towards, and I want to take a look here at this particular statistic that I was looking at, and when we talk about Black women, a lot of times when we think about Black African-American women being engaged in the process, there is an overwhelming number that I'm looking at of people who say that when it comes to the issues that matter the most, sometimes because of life's issues, it's very hard for Black women to be engaged in a lot of these agendas and initiatives simply because of the pressures of life. Agree, disagree?
Yeah, no, we found that in our survey, right? Like those barriers came up to the surface, all the way from the hours when meetings are to having access to childcare, to having transportation to get there and understanding the process. And so, at least on the CVH side, when members are coming to meetings, we provide, Metro cards for folks to get back and forth. We provide childcare, right? Because we know that that's a barrier. We also provide translation, right? Because if you are either Spanish speaking or Haitian Creole, what have you, want to be able to practice, have language justice, right? That you're able to communicate with everybody. And the same thing around food, right? Sometimes we have meetings over the dinner hour, so we have some type of food that people can eat while we're doing this important work. And it would be great if other entities took that into consideration and did similar things, right? Providing transportation, providing childcare, providing meals, and sanitation being critical, right? And also holding things in hours that people can actually participate.
Right. Share me, Juanita, about this, because we're right on the borderline of the 2022 midterm elections. A lot of people are concerned about where we're going to go here, but there is this push, there's this agenda to really get people out to vote. Give me your perspective on the work that you're doing there, because this election, I know the presidential election was critical, but and almost every election is critical, but we keep saying that, right? But when we look at the things that are at stake right now, particularly the House, the Senate, and a Democratic-led Congress, and a Democratic Senate, you got the opportunity to continue that, but those can go out with low voter turnout. So how are you addressing the issue of not just voter registration, but also voter turnout?
Yeah. No, I mean, at CVH and at CVH Power, those are critical for us, right? And that goes back to the information that we found in our survey around Black women being the most registered, but not as engaged. So when we're doing our door knocking, our texting, our phone banking, we are targeting Black women between the ages of 18 to 35 and talking to them, right? Not only just reminding them to go and vote, but also asking like, what are issues that are important to you during this election, right? And then bringing that back to like the campaign work that we're doing at our organizations and saying why it's so critical for people to get out and vote. We just did that with the primaries that we had for New York State, and at the federal level, being able to talk about, inflation is a real thing. When you go to the store and something that might have cost $4 at one point is now costing 10, right? Like, what happens with those policies depends on who's in those seats, right? So that being an important issue. Again, housing is a critical thing. What can be done at the federal level? Again, same thing, being able to connect people's day-to-day issues to what's happening with these elections, right? And then doing that ongoing education around, like Schoolhouse Rocks, right? The whole thing about like, I'm just a bill, like, right. Like understanding what that is, and then how does that apply to what's happening here and making it engaging and acceptable.
Somebody said Schoolhouse Rock. I don't know about that. That means you're too young to know about that. Those of us who know about Schoolhouse Rock know exactly what that means. I am just a bill sitting on Capitol Hill.
The Capitol Hill, exactly.
That's it. Listen, about your organization, I mean, you're a driver for it, not just finding out information, but also really being a proponent for being an advocate and a voice. So talk to us about how you and your organization continues to put pressure on these organizations and government entities, right, to really right the wrong and really bring some balance here.
Yeah, no, I mean, CVH Power that's what we do and that's what we're known for, right? So we're consistently meeting with elected officials. We are a member-led organization. So the campaign issues that we talk about, who we have to have conversations with, they come from our membership, right? So we have chapter meetings with members where we go through like, what do we want, who needs to give it to us by a certain time, and meeting with them and being able to chart out a path of action, right? To get what we need and what we want. So, we put pressure on them by meeting with them. We hold things called like direct actions, like protests, if they don't do what they need to do. We can go all the way from a full out like call-in campaign to somebody's office to mass protest at their office or their house. It depends, right? And it just goes back to being able to say, people who are directly impacted by the issues, holding those who are in power responsible for some of the issues, right? And saying, like, you need to right some of these wrongs, like you said. And so that comes from meeting with us, by hearing our stories, by hearing the evidence we have of these things, and really working with us to change these. That's why I'm excited about the work that we do at both organizations, because we can put forth what we want to see happen at CVH Power. But if the elected official isn't doing what we want them to do, or if there's an election coming up, it's our CVH Power, our sister org, that does candidate interviews, right? So we're asking them these questions about what they have or haven't done, or what they will and won't do. all of those things. And then it's the members who decide whether or not they get our support. And if you win our support, then we're knocking on doors for you. We're letting people know to vote for you. We're finding out all the different ways to make sure you're in that seat. And then following up on the commitment of co-governance with us, right? Which really means that we are in relationship to building and changing the policy to improve the lives of low-income working class folks of color in this state.
Yeah. So for you, obviously a lot of work that's on the table and a lot of things in front of you, but talk to me about your assessment because as you're looking at all these things, I'll go a little bit further. We've got a new mayor and he's in his first year, about almost 3/4 of the way through. Are you satisfied with what you're hearing by way of initiatives and dealing with things that are really particularly germane to the African-American Black woman experience?
I definitely think there is more to be done, and there's a relationship that needs to be developed, right? With new mayor, we have some really great relationships with members of the city council, and so being able to move that now into building a relationship with the mayor to really push further on the housing plan that he put out. That it was definitely something that got our attention. We're like, okay, this is interesting thing here, but now how do we actually put some meat to this, right? Like, how do we actually make this a reality? And then the same thing around economic justice, right? When we're talking about wages and jobs and education. So there's definitely so much more work to be done, and looking forward to engaging in deeper conversation and relationship with Mayor Adams to make that a reality.
Yeah. I want to thank you for joining us. Great conversation. Let us know as you get into survey number 2. Got to have you back, and we'll discuss this even further and chop it up.
Will do. Thank you so much.
All righty, Juanita Davis, our guest here. We want to thank you so much for being with us. Well, we come to the end of our show today. Hope that you enjoyed this week's episode of the Bronx Social Justice Forum. Now, if you want to rewatch the cable cast, you can do that on BronxNet's television by going to the website BronxNet.org. And if you want to always join in on the conversation, you're more than welcome. You can present your point of view. We gave ours and we gave a little bit. You heard others. You can give your point of view on our social media pages. And we encourage you, join us next week. We will continue to elevate the conversation, elevate the discussion, bring more awareness on the issues that matter the most. I'm Daren Jaime saying take care and thank you for watching the Social Justice Forum.